Hi, my name is Todd Hosfelt. Thanks for coming today. This is a show this show actually stemmed from my relationship with Stefan Kurten. He and I have been working together for, we think, 13 or 14 years. And during a long overdue studio visit last February, I started doing studio visits in the Dusseldorf area and was seeing some things that I thought were really interesting and really unusual. And that led to another trip to Germany and a lot of studio visits, which led to this show, which is an iteration of this show is currently up in our New York gallery. The same artists, different works. This show, the show that we're opening today, is actually my 200th exhibition. So today, Laura is going to kind of lead our conversation today, and there'll be a time for questions afterward, or you can stay and talk to the artists afterward as well. Laura Richard Janku is a freelance curator and writer and art historian who was the editor-in-chief of Art Week from 2003 to 2008. She's currently writing for artinfo.com, Art News, Art on Paper, Sculpture, Contemporary, Art US, several other publications. She is a PhD candidate in the history of art at UC Berkeley, and she is currently working on she's the volume editor for the forthcoming exhibition catalog, State of Mind, New California Art Circa 1970, and that's an exhibition that will be at the Berkeley Art Museum and the Orange County Museum of Art. So, Laura.
Great, thanks, Todd. And I now, in turn, will introduce our panelists, and then we'll get started on our discussion about Dusseldorf and why this exhibition is about Dusseldorf. Todd touched on some of the reasons why he decided to host it, but it bears sort of a deeper examination and understanding of kind of the cultural climate of Germany in general and the city of Dusseldorf to understand why it's such a fertile territory historically and in the present moment for artists. So to my far left here is Stefan Kurten, who was born in 1963 in Dusseldorf, where he attended the Kunstakademie Dusseldorf and received his diploma in 1989. His paintings merge inside and outside, surface and depth, to evoke notions of memory and loss as they are manifesting urban space and architecture. Stefan has exhibited extensively in the US and Europe, and his work is in the collections of the Museum of Modern Art in New York and San Francisco, the Berkeley Art Museum, the Saatchi Collection in London, the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts in Canada, and numerous museums in Germany. To my direct left is Susanne Wedewer, who is a German art critic and curator who studied art history, German literature, and philosophy at the universities of Münster and Bonn in Germany. She has worked for a variety of art magazines and the German Contemporary Art Encyclopedia, bear with me with the title, the Künstlerlexikon der Gegenwartskunst. And before relocating to the Bay Area in August, Susanne was the director of the Kunstverein Leverkusen, a nonprofit gallery providing exhibitions and small publications primarily to young emerging artists. And to my right is Birgit Jensen, who's studied art in Berlin and has lived and worked in Dusseldorf since 1985. Her paintings begin with an image of an iconic location like the pyramids or Mount Everest, to which she and likely we have never been. With pigment and brush, she blows up the pixels into a pattern, a low-resolution view of the site. These canvases are about distance and visibility, the physical distance of the viewer at which the image coalesces into a legible representation, and the tension between the geographic distance of these faraway places and the familiar mnemonic proximity we have to them because of their ubiquity in photographs. Her work has been exhibited in Germany and the US and is in the collections of the Museum Kunstpalast in Dusseldorf, the Museum der Stadt Flensburg, and the Sammlung des Landes Schleswig-Holstein. And to her right is Bernard Lokai, who was born in Bochumen in the Czech Republic. He studied painting at the Kunstakademie Dusseldorf with Gerhard Richter from 1982 to 1987, and his work explores the relationship between abstraction and representation, as well as the most fundamental question an artist can ask. What does it mean to paint an image? Lokai lives and works in Dusseldorf and has exhibited extensively throughout Germany. This is the first exhibition of his work in the US. Or I should say, the New York version of this exhibition was the first. So with that question of what does it mean to paint an image in mind, I'll ask another question. Why Dusseldorf? I think when we think of Germany and we think of art, most of us think of the wonderful classical collections in Berlin, or we think of Frankfurt with its museums, or we think even for those of us who travel to see art, we think of Kassel to see Documenta, or even to Münster to see the sculpture programs they put on every 10 years. So what's important about Dusseldorf? Why does the Hosfelt press release claim that Dusseldorf is the, quote, center of European art making because of its Kunstakademie, the most influential training ground for artists in the world? That's a pretty big statement. So I thought this discussion would help to take three different sections, and we'll begin by kind of laying out the history of the Kunstakademie to get kind of our bearings, sort of a 30,000-foot view of both Germany, its location within Germany, and the cultural and economic implications and the political histories that have gone into, it went into its founding almost 300 years ago, as well as how it's been able to maintain this status as a real center for art production. And then the second part, we will look at the post-World War II moment in which Joseph Beuys arrives at the Kunstakademie, and it really changes the inflection of the art that's studied and the kind of professors who teach there. And then we'll move into the present moment and talk about how are art schools different in Germany than they are in the US, and how do those differences kind of change the kind of art that's produced, and how does that affect particularly artists in their mid-careers that are working today. So to start us off with a bit of history is Susanne.
Okay, I just want to give you some facts of history, because that is not supposed to be a lecture of history. But it's interesting because the relationship between America and especially Dusseldorf are not really new. They are, to be honest, pretty traditional, pretty old. And therefore, it all goes back really to the Dusseldorf school. It's a landscape painter school. Perhaps some of you might be familiar with. Dusseldorf school is, in the time, pretty important, like in the middle of 1850. But it's not coming out of the blue. The Dusseldorf Academy was founded, and there are two different dates. It's founded as a drawing school, 1762 already, by a German painter, Lambert Krahe. At that time, he was the director of the Dusseldorfer Gallery. That means it was an art collection of paintings, mainly, founded 1670 or early 1700 by a nobleman called Jan Wilhelm, and he was married with an Italian wife, one of the Medici, and she was of course really into the arts. And at that time, Dusseldorf already was really, really important for the whole art movement at that time. Okay, let's go back to Dusseldorf School. Dusseldorf School was a movement from primarily landscape painters, like I said, at the beginning of 1850. There are two names really important to this movement. One is Schadow, we call him, Wilhelm von Schadow. He's mostly pretty, classical. It's about idealizing landscape and really traditional. And then there's the other one, Hübner, who was more orientated towards the Netherlands at that time. And he was pointing out the importance also to take really its own perspective in this whole social and political movement at that time. Hübner, for once, was really well known in America, and therefore I said that really relationship between America and Dusseldorf is quite an old one, because Hübner was the one who was pretty successful over here and way more successful than he has ever been in Germany, because a lot of Germans who really immigrated to the United States have been pretty successful at that time. And what he did was providing them a certain image of Germany these guys were missing. And therefore, of course, they appreciated his landscapes, his pieces of old Germany, and made him successful over here. And he even really collected a lot of money for Chicago after Chicago burned down in this big fire. And he also was named a professor in Philadelphia. At that time, also American artists went to Dusseldorf to get educated over there. Perhaps Bierstadt is one name you are familiar with. The other is Emanuel Lenze. Same thing here, it's about this image of Germany and of old Europe which was transported. After the United Germany was founded in 1871, the Dusseldorf School lost its importance, because I think this whole, the importance of the arts moved somehow to Berlin at that time. And for a long time, of course, Berlin was the center of the arts. You are quite familiar with the situation until World War II.
I just want to underscore here that the artists, the American artists we're talking about here are the Hudson River School. So we're talking about Eastman Johnson and George Caleb Bingham and all these people who are going to Dusseldorf and training with these German painters and then bringing that back and teaching it over here in the US. And so there's this whole trickle down. And this is also, we're talking the second half of the 19th century when it's a huge time of expansion in the US, and a major movement is for landscape painting that romanticizes the opening up of the West. So we see that effect even here on the West Coast with artists coming, really producing a lot of work in the plein air tradition that have a lot of allegorical ideas and romantic notions that come from both Germany and just from the transcendental movement on the East Coast. So it's a real important moment in the US, and to know about these the background in Germany, I think, and there's a whole philosophical side to this that we won't get into here, but it's just a really important influence.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that, you know, this relation is like an ongoing dialogue between both sides of the ocean. You know, it's just not something coming out of the blue or just being an idea of Todd Hosfelt, oh, we are coming up with an exhibition from artists coming from Dusseldorf. But there is kind of a context, there's some kind of history to that. And like I said, after the unification of Germany, after like 1871, the power shifted somehow. Dusseldorf was, of course, still the academy, was still pretty attractive to artists from all over the world, but more and more Berlin came into this focus. And for a long time, especially like in the 20s and 30s of the 1900s, Berlin was the center of the art, and also, of course, the capital from Germany. And then World War II interrupted the whole development and the whole movement. And for us in Germany, that meant also that after World War I, Berlin was not longer accessible so easily because it was surrounded by the wall and by Eastern Germany. And therefore, having the new capital of our country in Bonn, what means the Rhineland, what means really close to Dusseldorf, the decision was made to have Dusseldorf as a capital of the state, North Rhine-Westphalia. And all of a sudden, you have Dusseldorf in new power again, because it was well located in the middle of an industrial area known as the Ruhrgebiet, with a lot of money coming from the mining and the steel industry. It still had a really pretty functional airport. And therefore this decision, of course, was made clearly in favor of Dusseldorf. And at that time, Dusseldorf not only was the capital of the state, but also a lot of artists from all over the world came back to Dusseldorf to the academy. And the movement here known as action painting, we call it informal, was really having their artists in Dusseldorf. And also the so-called Group Zero with names like Uecker and Pine and Mack all were there right in Dusseldorf. Just for you to get the idea. And yeah, then we're already in today. And I just want to mention, it was the decision to have Dusseldorf as a capital of the state, but you have to picture this whole area. It's not like here you have San Francisco, of course you have Berkeley and Oakland, but then in between there is not that many cities really from the same importance like San Francisco. You have Los Angeles, but it's further away. In our area, Dusseldorf and Bonn and Cologne, they are so close.
What do you mean by close?
Close is like, I think if you would come to our area as an American, you would not even realize that there are really two different cities. It's so easy to go from one city to the other in half an hour. It doesn't take longer. And you have Dusseldorf as the academy, really from immense importance, but you have also Cologne, where the first art fair was founded in 1968. It was like the mother of all art fairs. And you have all the different museums, and therefore it's like a merging, an ongoing process, an ongoing communication. It's not an isolated situation in Dusseldorf. It's just part of a whole area movement.
Stefan, before we started, we were talking, and you made a really interesting comment about sort of the collecting as part of the cultural fabric in the Rhineland versus sort of the Prussian part of Germany. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, well, I said that, for example, the area of Dusseldorf was kind of conquered by Napoleon, and it's really close to the border of the Netherlands and Belgium. When I grew up as a child, I would drive my bicycle to the Netherlands to buy certain things that were illegal in Germany and drive back. And I was older, I wasn't a kid, I was anyway, so I'd say the influence comes from the West, comes from France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. While the Prussians who were in Berlin were much more, did not have such a big tradition in for example, art collecting. And, so I'd say it's a totally different thing, the Prussians and the Rhineland, and until today.
Mm-hmm. And Birgit, as someone who's spent quite a bit of time in Berlin and then relocated to Dusseldorf, what's sort of your assessment of the different collecting climates between the two? Or?
Well, when I studied in Berlin, there was no big tradition of collection and market. Berlin had a very, very small market, but Berlin was important as an island in the east before the war came down. And there was a lot of money from West Germany flowing into Berlin, and there were a lot of very good shows you could see. But it's not comparable with the Rhineland, where there are so many museums and you can always see good shows. In Berlin is only one city, and there's a number of institutions which one would follow if you study there. But when I came to Dusseldorf, I realized it's very, very close to many places which are very, very important in the art market and in art itself. They are very big institutions with important collections, and it's very good as an artist to be connected to institutions like that.
I think Stefan said earlier that in the size of the Bay Area, if the equivalent in Germany, there's something like 200 museums, and many of these founded from private collections. So, and in addition to those, there are many different kinds of places, different venues, to like the Leverkusen where you worked, as well as artist salons and clubs, and as well as publications being subsidized. And we'll get into some more of those current happenings a little later in the conversation.